set in Chornya Cholmy, National Maximum Security Penitentiary. In this prison, the inmates are harshly treated. Filled with high-level convicts, life is hard, except for the few selected ones like Boyka. This penitentiary has its own undisputed boxing champion, a ruthless yet fearless, brutal yet prayerful. Yuri Boyka is the undisputed king of this prison. Having taken down all sort and races of fighters, Boyka is facing yet another great opponent, a convict condemned for a second-degree homicide. However, as we see, this is easy peasy for Boyka. He mercilessly takes down his opponent in a few minutes, just before entirely demolishing his face. This guy, Boyka, is truly merciless, and you don't want to mess with him. Meanwhile, we are shown an American retired world boxing champion, George Iceman Chambers. He is currently running a brand endorsement gig here in Russia. After this Russian gig, Chambers and his manager must head back home. Unfortunately, somebody doesn't want him to. He is being framed. As we see, the plot started way before he even landed in Russia. George is arrested and is now being thoroughly interrogated by the Russian police. Back to the ring where Boyka and his opponent were fighting. Looks like Yuri had underestimated and unfinished his opponent. He rises up just before Boyka gives him a single last kick strong enough to end his life. The crowd hails Yuri Boyka's name. Many gamblers are now cashing out their bet placed in favor of Boyka. Boyka has just finished his fight, and now, his personal assistant is removing his gloves just before he receives the message about George's arrival at the prison the next day. Boyka seems unbothered, and he can't wait to beat the hell out of him. In Russia, drugs are illegal, and this seems to be a realistic way for Gaga to keep George Iceman in this Russian prison. George is presented to the police with packages of drugs sneaked in his Bible. Of course, he has no idea how it reached there. Because of this, he must be transferred to the maximum prison over possession of illegal drugs. On the other side, the prison illegal boss, Gaga, watches it over the news and is marvelously excited because his plan has worked as expected. This former heavyweight boxing champ, the kind of guy who could knock a man's soul out of his body just with one punch. He had it all, fame, and besides being a kind-hearted person, George is very stubborn. But life, as it often does, decided to throw him a sucker punch. He is now at the maximum penitentiary and he must cope to the new way of having things done. The whole aim of having George at the Russian penitentiary is so he can fight Boyka. By doing so, Gaga and other major prison leaders make a lot of money from the fight of these two champions. And not just against any regular prison brawler, no. He's up against the reigning and undisputed underground king of the penitentiary, a man who eats steel bars for breakfast and breaks bones like breadsticks, Yuri Boyka. Before being escorted to his cell, George has a discussion and briefing by the prison boss. He is given his prison package, the uniform, the bed sheets, and other items and asked to take a shower. Stubbornly, George refuses and beats all the 5 prison guards. Forcefully, the champ has no option but to shower, especially after he is accompanied with over 8 prison guards. Later at his cell, George cleans his face as he feels disgusted by the scent and the whole idea of being framed for a crime he knows nothing about. Fast forward. Stephen, George's cellmate, asks him to leave the cell and instead move to get breakfast, but George is still getting used to the entire place. He's getting used to the life, the food, and the people. George is almost knocked by Victor, a feet-paralyzed prison mate. Meanwhile, after that, the undisputed and self-proclaimed penitentiary champion arrives, and in respect to his presence, every inmate rises up except George Iceman, who refuses to. When approached by one of Yuri Boyka's boys, he beats him up and immediately spits saliva in his cup before disgustingly pouring it on Boyka. The duo later fights just before they were stopped by the prison guards. This is what Gaga wants, but they must fight in the ring. As you can see, Boyka isn't just a fighter, he's a machine. A spinning, flipping, knee-shattering beast who calls himself the most complete fighter in the world. And unlike Chambers, who is a former and retired champion, the stake would be high in favor of Boyka. Boyka is now very furious and he asks the penitentiary boss, "Why did you stop me? He's filled with rage and he wants to finish George Chambers. Will he beat him? Let's wait and see. Meanwhile, Marco. The penitentiary boss meets with Gaga to discuss about how best he can convince George to accept the fight with Boyka. He greatly gets paid for the work he is doing. Moving forward, Steven is being bullied by a group of fellow inmates. Boyka's boys sent to ask Steven to convince George. To his luck, he gets helped by George. He takes down all of them, and everybody starts to fear him. Steven further warns George to be careful, and if he must stay safe and alive, he must come into agreement with Gaga. George turns him down and said,
My own way of staying healthy.
He has his own way of staying alive. Boyka's boys return to him and he is furious. He follows George and challenges George Chambers to fight him in the ring. But this furious and angry old champion wants to beat Boyka right here and now. Immediately they started the fight. The prison guards came to stop them. Now, Boyka is facing another opponent, right in the presence of George Chambers, but Marco calls Gaga to inform him that George hasn't accepted to fight yet. Krot is also watching the fight. As expected, Boyka mercilessly beats the opponent, spits on him, and tells George, "You are next." George is asked to go and meet Marco, but just like earlier on, he beats all the prison guards just before dozens of guards are sent to take him to Marco. After a negotiation with him, George undergoes through several punishments, just to let him change his mind. Luckily for him, there comes Krot, a wheelchair-chained inmate. He gives him a shovel to help him clean the sewage. He further asks George to clean it before returning it to him. George returns the shovel to Victor Krot, and he is told by Steven that Krot, the wheelchair guy, killed some prison guards just before being wheelchaired. He doesn't believe him. Boyka really wants George to fight him, and he again sends several boys to George to intimidate and lure him into a fight. They must convince him to accept the fight, but with the help of Krot, George slaughters all of them. George is now taken to the hole. His new home is now with the Roddens. It's stinging cold right here, but Krot brings for him some water, bread, and medicine to help him stand fever he could have caught from the hole. After that, Krot confronts George and lets him know that they will never let him out of here. Of course, unless he cooperates. Looks like all tricks and punishments haven't worked. Now Gaga himself tries to convince George that unless he fights, he would be getting out. George is, however, still having hopes in his manager until Gaga brings him. George finds out that his manager has already been bribed. All hopes of getting out is now lost. George is now terribly furious. George has no option but to accept the fight. He goes and starts training for his forthcoming fight. Just before the fight, Steven is approached by Boyka's boys. These guys think George may beat their champion, and therefore he's asked to drug George so that Boyka can easily win. Finally, the match is on. The first match between Chambers and Boyka is nothing short of a massacre. Chambers walks in like a proud lion, but within seconds, he realizes he's in a cage with a tiger on steroids. Boyka doesn't just fight, he performs. Flying knees, spinning kicks, and takedowns that make gravity question itself. In the first half, George mercilessly beats Boyka. When he thinks Boyka is no more, Boyka gets back with a greater comeback, but he retaliates as well. After the first round, George is resting and he asks for water. Steven is afraid of giving him the poisoned water, however. He has no choice. In the first 2 minutes of the second round, Chambers, in all his heavyweight glory, gets demolished. The once proud champ is left lying on the cold ground, tasting his own defeat along with a saliva spit from Boyka. Chambers, now bruised, battered, and humiliated, finally learns that Steven drugged him. He gets out of the sickbay and rushes to Steven just to find out that Steven couldn't stand the shame he put himself into, so Steven killed himself because of that. George further confronts Boyka and Marco, and furiously tells them the fight won't fair because he was drugged. Marco beats and takes George to the cold. He must learn his lessons over there. Meanwhile, Boyka faces his boys and angrily confronts them for drugging George. He wanted to fairly beat him, not with their help. In the cold, fellow inmates tired of the brutal treatment from the Undisputed Champion gather, and instead of allowing Chambers to take his punishment, they give him food, jackets, and gloves. Immediately, Marco realizes this. He calls all those who participated in helping George. Surprisingly, all the inmates agreed, and he punished all of them. George is immediately released, taken back to his cell, and Gaga promises to brutally deal with Marco should anything happen to George. After that, he negotiates for a fair and better term with Gaga. George also asks him to get cold jackets for the fellow inmates dealing with this terrible coldness. Krot, an old, wise, and secretly badass prisoner who used to be a fighter himself. He sees potential in Chambers and decides to train him, not just in boxing, but in the dark arts of grappling, kicks, and bone-snapping survival tactics. Slowly and painfully, George adapts to Krot's new tactics. His punches become sharper, his stance becomes lighter, and most importantly, he learns all Boyka's tactics. He surely wants to beat Boyka at his own game. Just before the rematch date, Krot and George becomes friends, and now they share some personal secrets. Krot tells him he is convicted for the crime of his brother, but that's not all. He also fought and killed a prison guard, and that's the reason why he's here for life. It's now the rematch day. George and Boyka get their final preparations just before the fight, and the tension is thicker than Russian winter air. The whole prison gathers because everyone loves a good bloodbath, and today's special on the menu is revenge. Both fighters enter the ring, and Boyka, still confident, still deadly, comes in spinning and flipping, but this time, Chambers is ready. No longer just a boxer, he counters, dodges, and adapts. Boyka throws his deadliest kick, a spinning tornado of destruction, but Chambers catches it and delivers a knee so vicious it might have sent Boyka's ancestors a message. With one final devastating punch, the Iceman shatters the unbreakable Boyka. After the rest, on second round, Boyka comes back stronger, but with the new skills and tactics George trained, the fight is expectedly challenging for the undisputed champion. Later, after the rest, Krot reminds George that if he wants to get out and not rot in this prison, he must destroy Boyka. After that, George is ready for the destructions. He unleashes fatal punches, blows, and kicks just before breaking Boyka's right leg. George Chambers proves he's not just the old champion, but a stronger and better fighter. With the fight won, the prison's corrupt system collapses, and Chambers finally earns his freedom. He walks out, not just as a fighter, but as a warrior reborn. Chambers trades all his reward with Krot's freedom. He leaves the Russian maximum security penitentiary, a changed man with friends. Meanwhile, with the help of George, Krot is waiting for his niece, and there she comes. Krot is nervous, but they both meet and hug with intriguing emotions. George smiled and left. Thank you for watching.